Okay.
So, good morning, everybody. Good to see you again as we are exploring the matter of liberation, enlightenment, and having Sri Bagavath from India, who is guiding us through this very simple matter, but that seems to be very complicated. But, so Sri Bagavath is trying to explain in a simple and direct way of understanding and resolving this matter once and for all. So thank you, Sri Bagavath.
Thank you, Lanir. I welcome all of you for this today's meeting. So, as usual, we can have a summary of what we have seen previously. So, we have classified our problem into three categories. The first one is purely psychological, and the second one is purely physical, and the third one is the combination of both psychological and physical. So we have already seen if it is purely psychological, we can simply leave it that we cannot do anything. So if it is purely physical, we can do the needful work towards the problem. So there is no problem in the case of purely psychological and purely physical. But when it is complicated in the form of when it is joined together and take a complicated role. So that is why we have to understand the functioning of our mind and how we have to make ourselves able to deal with the third category, the problem of both psychological and physical. So here we have seen the mind as functioning in four aspects: manam, buddhi, siddham, and ahankar. That is mind, intellect, character, and the ego. So in this way, it is functioning in the four ways. So that is the nature of our mind. But when the mind has to meet the problem, if the total mind is meeting the problem, there is no problem at all. So it can very easily deal with the problem as if it is a physical work. Whether it is maybe in the form of the third category, both the combination of both psychological and physical, the total mind very easily can meet the problem. And there is no problem in the case of functioning of the total mind. But at the same time, the conscious mind is the 1/4 of the total mind. And the conscious mind is always functioning. And the total mind is coming only in case of necessity alone. It will not function always. It will keep silent. In case of necessity, it comes and deal with the problem very easily, and it also disappear. But the conscious mind is functioning always. It is functioning in the 24 hours of the day. So each and every moment, the conscious mind is functioning. And the conscious mind, it can be classified as the 25% of the total mind. It can be named as the mind itself. But if you take the mind, if the conscious mind alone into consideration, we can divide the conscious mind into the sensory part of the conscious mind is the major portion of the conscious mind. Through senses and everything, it is functioning as a sensitive part. So as a sensory organ, the conscious mind is functioning. The most of the function of the conscious mind is the sensory part. So we can, as a rough example, we can take it as a 70%. The 70% of the conscious mind is the sensory, the sensitive aspect. The remaining 30% is occupied by the intellect, the character, and the ego, each 10%. So totally 100%. But even in that case also, the sensory, even though the sensory aspect is the powerful one, it takes the major role, but it submits to the ego part. The ego takes the dominant role, and the 70% submits to the 10%. So that is happening always. So that is the reason for our problem and agony and our psychological disturbance. So here, the ego has to understand and submit. The 10% has to submit. Then only the sensory part takes the major role. So if the sensory part takes the major role, everything will be all right. And the ego part also, on its submission, it can have a good role. But at the same time, if the ego part takes a prominent role, the sensory part submits to the ego, and the total conscious mind becomes a problematic aspect. So in this respect, we have completed in the last session. Now we have to proceed further. Lani, you can translate the summary.
Okay, thank you, Shri Bagavath.
Thank you. Thank you.
אז שרי בגבת בעצם עשה חזרה מהירה על כל מה שלמדנו בשיעורים הקודמים. נתחיל עם זה שבעצם יש לנו 3 סוגים של בעיות, אתגרים בחיים. יש אתגרים שהם קשורים רק לעולם החיצוני, יש אתגרים שהם קשורים רק לעולם הפנימי, יש אתגרים או בעיות שקשורות גם לעולם הפנימי וגם לעולם החיצוני. אז מה שקשור לעולם החיצוני, זה ברור שאנחנו צריכים לפעול ולפתור. מה שקשור לעולם הפנימי, אמרנו כבר, אנחנו מניחים לזה להיות ולא מתעסקים עם זה, וזה פותר את עצמו. ומה שהוא גם וגם, זה אתגר שבדרך כלל רבים מאיתנו מתבלבלים איתו. וכאן הוא, בבעיות מהסוג הזה, שהן גם קשורות לעולם החיצוני וגם קשורות לעולם הפנימי, שרי בגבת הציע את המודל שמחלק את המיינד ל4 חלקים, מודל שהגיע מהודו העתיקה. מיינד, הנפש האנושית מורכבת מ4 חלקים. יש את החלק של המוח המודע, הנפש המודעת, המחשבות, הרגשות והתחושות. יש את החלק של האינטלקט, שהוא החלק שמבחין, שיכול להחליט מה זה מה. יש את החלק של האגו, זה תחושת הנפרדות שלנו, ויש את החלק של האישיות שלנו, שזה בעצם התת מודע, זה המחסן של כל ההתנסויות העבר שלנו. בשפה המודרנית אפשר לקרוא לזה ה-DNA שלנו. אז זה 4 החלקים שאיתם אנחנו מתמודדים, וכאשר המיינד הטוטלי, זאת אומרת, כל המיינד פוגש איזושהי בעיה, אז הוא בדרך כלל פותר אותה באופן מאוד מהיר ומאוד טוב. הבעיה שלנו זה שאנחנו זורקים את האחריות יותר מדי על המיינד המודע, ואז שם נוצרים הבעיה. ואז הוא עשה זום אין על המיינד המודע, והמיינד המודע, השכל המודע, אם אתה מסתכל רק עליו, אתה עוזב בינתיים את 3 החלקים האחרים, אז אתה רואה שגם הוא מורכב מבערך, הוא נתן 70% תפיסה סנסורית, תפיסה חושית. אז המיינד המודע, התפקיד שלו המקורי היה להיות בתפיסה סנסורית, בפחות 2/3% מהזמן, והאינטלקט, המחשבה, האגו, היה אמור לתפוס עוד 30%. אבל מה שקורה במציאות, מה שקורה זה שהאגו יחד עם האינטלקט, המחשבה, הם תופסים את מרכז הבמה, הם גונזים את ההצגה כביכול, התפיסה החושית, ואנחנו מוצאים את עצמנו היום בעצם עסוקים עם מחשבות, עם דעות, עם רעיונות, עם תפיסות, כל מה שקשור לעולם המנטלי שלנו, ולמעשה, שנייה, ולמעשה, מזניחים או כמעט לא שמים לב לעולם החושי שמסביבנו, לתפיסות החושיות שלנו. ושרי בגבת אומר שברגע שהאיזון הזה יחזור למה שאמור להיות, זאת אומרת שאנחנו 2/3 מהזמן או מהיכולת שלנו בעצם מצויים בתפיסה חושית, ורק 30% שימוש באגו ובמחשבה, אז הבעיות שלנו יסתדרו. זה מה שהיה עד עכשיו. Okay, thank you, Sri Bagavath.
Okay. So now the ego has to submit. How does the submission happen? So the ego has to understand that the ego is the problem. But the ego will not have the capacity of the examination. So first of all, it has to give permission to the intellect to solve the problem, because even though the ego is take the dominant role, because of the dominant role of the ego itself is suffering because of some problem, because of the agony, because of the bad feeling. So everything, the sufferer is also the ego. So naturally, the ego has the inclination to submit its role of deciding the matter to the intellect. So in this case, the intellect has to take the role. But the intellect also has it has the understanding. The intellect has the the intellect can discuss, it can examine what is the nature of the ego, what is the nature of the sensory part. So everything it can understand. So mainly the intellect has to decide the ego is the problem. So the intellect has to, if the intellect has to understand the unnecessary role of the ego, so then only it can give message to the same, to the ego also. So whenever the ego feels it is unable to solve the problem, naturally it yields its power to the intellect. And the intellect also the same thing, that the ego is the problem. So in this way, the deciding factor for the submission is the intellect. So intellect has to decide. So when the intellect decides itself, naturally, actually the character part, that is the energy part, also gives some energy for the submission. So on the submission of the ego and the intellect in the fit of the sensory part, the sensory part takes the dominant role. The taking the dominant role by the sensory part means it accommodates the intellect and the ego within itself. So it is the action of love, it is the action of some affection or some attachment, and the action of oneness. So it accommodates the intellect and the ego. So when it is accommodated, when the intellect and the ego is accommodated within the sensory part of the conscious mind, the sensory part of the conscious mind takes the major role. So within the sensory part, the intellect and the ego and the character part, the powerful part, so everything takes a correct and normal role. So then there is no problem within the field of the mind, within the field of the conscious mind. So it is when it is functioning like this, in case of necessity, naturally the total mind will take care of it. And when the total mind is functioning, there is not at all a problem. So only in the part of the conscious mind alone, the problem is existing. But when the intellect and the ego part submit to the sensory part of the conscious mind, so the problem of the conscious mind is also gone away. So that is the functioning of the correct way of functioning of the conscious mind. So here, the sensory part does not have any role in itself unless the submission happens. So here, the submission alone is the main thing in the conscious mind. So all these things has to be understood by the intellect of the conscious mind, the intellect part of the conscious mind. When it is understood, everything is okay, and so it will be the action of love, and it will be the action of energy and life. Okay, Lanier, you can translate.
Okay, Shri Bagavath, just a minute
Okay.
to have some clarification that I understood correctly.
Okay.
So what I understood from you is that the ego transfer the work for understanding and transfer it to the intellect.
Yeah.
The intellect start inquiring, what is the nature of the problem? Why am I suffering? Why is the ego suffering? Then it discovers that actually the dominance of the ego in the conscious field is the source of the problem.
Yeah.
So he finds that out and he informs the ego, well, sorry to say, but you are the problem yourself. So you have to take your proper place in the field of consciousness and let the sensory perception be the dominant, take the dominant role in the
Yeah.
And when that happens, what happens is actually that the ego and the intellect and the character are included in the sensory perception, and then when you are encountering a problem, there is an immediate response of the total mind to the problem. Then the problem is solved immediately.
Yeah. But the total mind, in case of necessity alone, the total mind will function. Presently, we can forget the total mind. So here, the conscious mind alone is the present problem. And in the conscious mind, the ego has to submit. And the intellect will advise that you have to submit. You should not take the major role. You should not take the responsibility to solve everything. So you have to submit. So you have to go along with what is happening. So in this way, the intellect has to advise the submission of the ego. So that is the advice is given by the intellect.
So
the ego submits.
So like you said, the crux of the matter is the submission of the ego. And then ego submits to to what exactly is it submitting to?
Submitting means not submitting to anything. So it has to withdraw from their taking responsibility. So submission means to take withdrawal from taking responsibility.
So the moment he withdraws from his responsibility, then automatically the perception, the sensory perception, takes the major role.
Major role. Okay.
Then this is automatic.
Automatic.
So the submission of the ego is not to anybody or somebody. It understands that that he is the problem, and then he says, okay, if I'm the problem, I withdraw and let something else be in the front.
Yeah.
And this front actually is the sensory perception.
Yeah.
And okay. This is
okay.
Okay. So thank you. I'll try to explain it in Hebrew. אוקיי, אז שרי בגבת בעצם מדבר על זה כאשר אנחנו נתקלים באיזושהי בעיה, איזשהו מצב בחיים שלנו, או שפשוט יש לנו סבל קיומי, שאנחנו לא יודעים מה המקור שלו, אז זוהי האגו, זה שסובל, זה שמרגיש שהחיים קשים ורוצה לפתור את הבעיה, הוא מעביר את האחריות על החקירה לאינטלקט. והאינטלקט מתחיל לחקור את הסיבה לסבל, והמסקנה שהוא מגיע אליה היא שבעצם שורש הבעיה היא שהאגו לוקח על עצמו אחריות שהוא לא היה צריך לקחת. זאת אומרת שהוא נתקל בבעיה, והאגו חושב שאני, עליי, על הכתפיים שלי, אני צריך לפתור את הבעיה הזו. וכאן תחושת אני העושה, אני זה שצריך לעשות, אני זה שצריך לפתור, אני זה שצריך להשיג, להגיע, היא הבעיה בעצם. ומה ששרי בגבת אומר, זה שכאשר האגו מבין שהוא כשלעצמו זה הבעיה, שהאחריות שהוא לוקח על עצמו היא הבעיה, אז זה כמו מישהו שמניח את המפתחות על השולחן, עובד, שאומר, בסדר, אני כבר לא אחראי, אני לא אחראי יותר, אני שם את המפתחות על השולחן, אני הולך, אני יוצא מהתמונה, ואז מה שקורה זה שבאופן אוטומטי, מה שתופס את מרכז הבמה, זה, כמו ששרי בגבת אומר, זה התפיסה הסנסורית. זאת אומרת, המיינד בעצם חוזר לתפקד בצורה שבה המקורית שבה הוא היה אמור לתפקד. שהתפיסה הסנסורית היא החלק העיקרי, ו30% אחרים הולכים לאגו, לאינטלקט ולתת מודע, לאופי, לאישיות. אז מבחינת שרי בגבת, הדבר העיקרי, עצם העניין, הדבר המרכזי שצריך לקרות, זה שהאגו עצמו מבין באמצעות האינטלקט שהוא הבעיה. ומה זה האגו הבעיה? התפיסה שאני זה שצריך לפתור את העניינים, האחריות היא עליי, תחושת אני העושה, אני זה שצריך לעשות, אני זה שצריך לפתור. אז האגו עצמו מבין שהוא צריך לעזוב את הבמה, צריך להתפטר מהתפקיד המרכזי, ולהניח לתפקוד הטבעי של המיינד להתרחש, שעל פי שרי בגבת זה אומר ש2/3 מהמיינד מתפקד באופן של תפיסה חושית, ורק 1/3 מתפקד באופן של מנטלי, זאת אומרת, אגו, תת מודע ואינטלקט.
2/3 מהמים במדע, לא?
כן, 2/3 מהמים במדע. That's it, Shri Bagavath.
Okay. Now we can have some discussion on this point. If anybody have any clarification, we can have the clarification and discuss.
Yes. כן, אני יכולה לשאול? כנראה שאני נתקלתי באנשים עם אגו, אני לא יודעת, אולי זה שייך לזה, שהם לא אוהבים לבקש עזרה גם כן. שאומרים להם, אם אתם צריכים משהו, תגידו, וזה, ולמרות זה הם סובלים, ואולי בגלל האגו הם לא משתפים פעולה, וזה, זה קשור.
Rita, I will ask Shri Bagavath. Rita is saying that she has met people in her life that the ego was so strong that they would not accept help from anybody. So she would tell them, if you need any help, you just say. But she said that they were reluctant to get any help, and she asked if it is related to the topic.
So in the external actions, the external situation, the ego takes a role. So the some egoistic aspect, she is functioning. She is claiming this is the problem.
She's claiming that she's saying that she met people in her life that they would not accept help from anybody. She's asking, is it because of their ego? Is it because of their strong identification with the ego?
For example,
just a minute. ריטה, את יכולה לתת דוגמה למשל?
כן, אני מכירה אנשים שממש סובלים, ובדיעבד הם מספרים לי שהיה להם ככה וככה, אז למה לא ביקשתם עזרה? וזהו, ופתאום הם שותקים.
She's saying that there are people that some people, they are suffering for a long time, but they don't tell anybody. And only after a long time, they would tell her that they were suffering. And then she would ask, so why didn't you ask for help? Why didn't you speak? So she is asking if this situation has anything to do with the topic we are discussing.
So it may be, she may be in the thinking that why should we give disturbance to the other people? We can take our suffering for ourselves. It may be the reason for that. So here, the main thing is that if we suffer within ourselves, what will be the reason? For if some situation gives some suffering to ourselves, so in that case, what is the reason for our suffering in a given situation? So here, the ego is the reason for the suffering, because it takes everything on its command. So everything will be within the command of the ego. So it is not possible. So then it takes the responsibility for everything. So taking responsibility for something, if it is some unexpected result happens, so it is affected. So that is the reason for the suffering. So taking responsibility and the failure of the there is no success, and if some failure happens, so it cannot tolerate the failure. So it ends in suffering. So here, the responsibility alone is the problem. So for our suffering, what will the reason? That we can understand. In that way, we can understand.
Okay. אז I will translate. אז ריטה, אז שיר בגבת אומר שיכול להיות שאותם אנשים מרגישים שבשביל מה להטריד אנשים אחרים. אני אסבול לבד ואני לא אטריד מישהו אחר. אבל הנושא שהוא מדבר עליו זה בעצם מהי הסיבה לזה שהם סובלים. והסיבה לזה שמישהו סובל זה בגלל שהאגו שלו לוקח אחריות גדולה מדי על עצמו. והוא למעשה לא מבין שזה שהוא לוקח את האחריות הגדולה מדי על עצמו, זאת הבעיה. שהוא צריך לזוז הצידה ולתת למיינד הטוטלי לתפקד. בסדר? אוקיי.
Okay.
תודה, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question, Sri Bagavath.
Okay, okay.
Okay. Um, you spoke about the sensory part,
Hmm.
and I'm asking about the unconscious mind,
Hmm.
which is all the time sends you, gives you things arising from the unconscious mind, and when they are arising, it has some sensation part, right? Things are, it's coming with sensations also. So is what you are talking about with submitting more to the sensory part, in a way submitting to your unconscious mind, and in that way you are more open and not being operated by it unknowingly, that it controls you. I mean, you don't try to control the unconscious mind, but it is.
Unconscious mind means the total mind or some other else?
I don't know.
What do you mean? What do you mean by unconscious mind?
The unconscious mind. You don't refer to the unconscious mind in your view, when you.
So I am not speaking anything about unconscious mind. So conscious mind and the total mind. The conscious mind is that we are the natural, the regular functioning of the mind is known as conscious mind. The total mind is it comprises of all mind, buddhi, manam, buddhi, siddham, ahankar. So all the total is known as total mind.
Okay.
So in case of necessity alone, the total mind will function. It will comes and goes, disappears. But regularly, the regular mind is the conscious mind. The conscious mind is the wavering mind. It is looking something here and there. So in this way, it is just like a wavering mind. It functioning throughout the day. So that is the conscious mind.
Yes. So what about the unconscious mind or the subconscious mind, which is behind, and which is
the total mind. Total mind will not come into the function. It is always when it is necessary, it will appear and deal with the problem and it disappear. So it will not give us any problem. So total mind will not give us any problem.
So the total mind is the subconscious mind or unconscious mind?
So it is the total of everything, including conscious mind. The total mind includes our conscious mind also. So it functions totally. So the mind is four part: the mind, intellect, character, and the ego. That is the four components of the mind, and the total is known as total mind. But so one portion, the 1/4 of the total mind is known as the regular mind, the conscious mind. But the total mind includes the regular mind also. The total mind includes the conscious mind also.
Why am I?
So it will not functioning unconsciously. It will function consciously.
Okay. It will not function unconsciously. Why?
So conscious mind is always functioning. So along with the total mind also functioning, along with the conscious mind, so we are conscious of the functioning of the also.
Yes. Why am I asking? Because I had some kind of I was
So without some reason, you may feel some problem. You mean like that?
I mean that I have more. I felt more aware of the things that are happening in the back of our head. Like suddenly, I was more aware of those things, how they operate me all the time. Things are, and I was just more aware of the atmosphere of my mind. which usually I can miss it very easily. But suddenly I was more aware that there are stuff behind the focus of my conscious mind, which are always in a way they are responsible to my actions or my reaction, my emotional reaction, and I would be more aware of it, that there is this thing behind that is always there, and I would in a way be more. In a way, I'm not. I would be just feeling just aware of it. I don't try to do any. I'm just with it. I don't try to make anything up, and it resembles maybe a little bit because it's coming with natural sensations, because it is related to the body. Whenever you have some feeling, it comes also with some sensation, right?
Unpleasant feeling?
Let's say, doesn't matter. It has some impression in the body, right? You feel it somewhere. You feel this.
So you feel it in your body, but it is unpleasant.
Yeah, you feel it in a physical way too. So
okay.
I was wondering if this is what you mean when you say that you give the sensory part more. You are more focused on the sensory part because when you are not going submitted to the ego, when the ego is not in the front, so it is more in the sensory part. So I was wondering if it is similar, if it's.
So actually, when the sensory part is functioning, there is no classification of good and bad. So when we feel it is pleasant and unpleasant, that means the ego takes the role. So the reason may be many things, because of our unnecessary feeling or good feeling or anything. Any reason may be behind that, doesn't matter. But when it is happening, what is happening is that the ego takes the role. The ego thinks it is bad, I should not have this. This is good, I must retain this forever. So this is the saying of the ego. So when the ego submits, whatever happens, it is happening. It is just happening. When it is just happening, it submits to the sensory part of the conscious mind. When the sensory part takes the role, so it is action of love. So within the love, everything is comprised, everything is contained. So when it is contained within the love, everything dissolves. Nothing will happen. Whether it may be unpleasant or pleasant, everything dissolves in a natural way. So it is in a living way. It is happening. Some life is happening. Life energy is happening. So when the life energy is happening, all the wounds will be dissolved. Everything will be all right. So when some torturing is there, when we claim something, this must be like that, this should not be like that, then only some problem will be there, some fight will be there. So when love is there, there is no fight at all. Some life energy will be there. But within the life energy, all the problem will be solved in a natural way.
So love, in a way, is just the absence of resistance.
Yeah.
Not it's just the absence of fighting something.
Fighting.
Okay.
Okay. Lani, you can translate the discussion. You have a major role.
Well, Shrat can then translate her question, then I translate your answer.
Okay.
Double role.
Okay. אז אני שאלתי, האם כששרי בגבת חילק את המיינד המודע לחלק החושי, הסנסורי, אז האם יש לזה איזשהו קשר למה שאני פשוט סיפרתי לו שאני יותר, בזמן האחרון הייתי מודעת כאילו לחלק הלא מודע או החצי מודע שכל הזמן נמצא איפשהו, בעצם זה האטמוספירה של האווירה שאנחנו בתוכה חיים, זאת אומרת, האטמוספירה של המיינד שלנו, כאילו כל הזמן יש שם איזה משהו מאחורה, רוכש וגועש, ואני כאילו זיהיתי את זה כסוג של חצי מודע, תת מודע כזה, ויצא שפשוט, שאלתי את זה, כי יצא שפשוט הייתי יותר מודעת לחלק הזה, איך הוא נוכח בחיים שלי, ואני שאלתי את שרי בגבת, האם זה בעצם משהו מתכוון, כי כשאתה מודע למשהו, כשאתה מודע לחלק הזה, אז יש לזה גם ביטוי פיזיולוגי, דוגמה, כשאני מודעת לתחושות, לרגשות ותחושות לאווירה של המיינד שלי, אז יש לזה גם ביטוי סנסורי. אז אני שאלתי, האם זה בעצם משהו התכוון אליו, כשהוא דיבר על להיות יותר בחלק הסנסורי, לתת יותר תשומת לב לחלק הסנסורי, ובכך כאילו באיזשהו מובן אתה מנטרל כאילו השפעות, את ההשפעות כביכול הלא מודעות שבאות מהמיינד. אז עכשיו התשובה.
מה הבנת?
טוב, אני פשוט, המוח שלי הוא לא כזה מוח שיכול, אני חייבת קצת לתת לדברים לשקוע לפני אני לא יכולה להסביר את התשובה.
אוקיי. אז אני אנסה להסביר מה שאני הבנתי, כמובן זה עובר דרך המוח שלי. אז מה ששרי בגבת בעצם אמר לאושרת זה שכאשר אתה בעצם כאשר אתה מסווג את התחושות כנעימות או לא נעימות, אז בעצם האגו בא, זה בעצם הפעילות של האגו. עם התחושות של הגופניות שלך, אתה אומר אותה, אתה מזהה אותם ומזדהה איתם כתחושות נעימות או לא נעימות, אז בעצם האגו כאן נכנס ומשחק תפקיד. כאשר האגו נכנע, שזה אומר, האגו מפסיק לקחת אחריות על פתרון הבעיות, ומאפשר לתפיסה הסנסורית לקחת את מרכז הבמה, מה שקורה פה, שרי בגבת הכניס את המושג אהבה, זה שהיעדר ההתנגדות של האגו למה שקורה, בעצם חושף את הטבע האמיתי שלנו, שהוא אהבה, וכאשר האהבה נמצאת, אז הדברים נפתרים באופן מאוד מאוד טבעי. זאת אומרת, שהמלחמה הפנימית, הקונפליקט הפנימי בעצם מכסה על הטבע האמיתי שלנו, וכאשר אנחנו מבינים את זה, והקונפליקט מפסיק, הטבע האמיתי שלנו, שהוא אהבה, נחשף. ואז בתוך הטבע האמיתי הזה, הדברים מתחילים להסתדר מעצמם. אז זאת ההבנה שלי לגבי מה ששרי בגבת אמר. That's it, שרי בגבת.
Okay. So here, even though the major part of our conscious mind is the sensory portion, and the ego part is very meager position, so only 10%. So the change is necessary only in the 10% alone. There is no necessity for the major portion, the 70%. There is no necessary for any dealing with the 70%. Only the 10% alone has to change. So that is why all religion train us for some submissive aspect. We have to submit. So we have to understand, we have to learn how to submit. So that is why all the religions, there is no exception in that case. Every religion doing the same thing, how to submit. So the ego has to submit. But unfortunately, somebody misses that, and in the name of religion, they boost their ego also. But the really naturally, if our concern must be the submission of the ego. So that is the main role. If the submission happens, everything is okay. So it is a kind of science within ourselves. And the sensory part is doing its role, and the ego part, when it submits, it goes along with the sensory part also. Then there is no difference between the ego and the sensory part. Both become one. So in that case, everything is okay. The total life will be in a different way. So when the sensory part takes a major role, so our total life became a life of love, life of kindness, life of compassion. And it will be but it is also good for the ego also. The ego will also satisfied when it submit to the sensory part of our conscious mind. Okay, Lanier.
Okay. As just one clarification, Shri Bagavath.
Okay.
Maybe for some people it's not very clear what is exactly this submission of the ego. What do you mean by submission of the ego? What is what does it actually mean, practically speaking? What does it mean?
So the ego takes a major role, and I can do anything. So when it assumes that it can do anything for itself, for other people, or for me also, for other people also, I can do anything. So in this way, if our approach will be like this, so it is when it is again in the outer world, outer action, we have to take some role. Then only we can execute some action. But within ourselves, it becomes a problem. So I can dominate, I can live like what I like, in what way I like, but we cannot control ourselves. We cannot separate ourselves. So psychologically, the liberation is the natural thing, but some controlled aspect, whatever in the form of control, the fight will be there. So here the ego has to understand the limitation of itself.
So he can assume a role in the outside world, but when he assumes a role in the inside world, then it becomes a problem.
Problem.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
אז שיר בגבעת בעצם חוזר במילים אחרות על מה שהוא אמר במהלך הפגישה שלנו. הוא אומר למעשה שהבעיה המרכזית שאליה שמו לב כל הדתות, זה רק הבעיה של הקנייה של האגו, ולכן כל הדתות, כולל הדת היהודית, כולל הדת הנוצרית והמוסלמית, הם מכוונים לקנייה של האגו. הם מכוונים לקנייה של האגו, כי בעצם זה שורש הבעיה. כאשר האגו נכנע, ולא חשוב מאיזה סיבה, זה יכול לקרות בכל מיני דרכים, אבל כאשר האגו נכנע, וזה אומר שהאגו מבין שבעצם אין לו שליטה כמו שהוא חושב. הוא לא מסוגל לשלוט בדברים כמו שהוא חושב שהוא יכול, הוא לא מסוגל לשלוט ברגשות, הוא לא מסוגל לשלוט במחשבות, הוא לא מסוגל לשלוט בתחושות. כאשר הוא מבין את זה, ומניח לתפקיד הזה הפנימי, אז התפיסה הסנסורית יכולה לתפוס את מרכז הדמה, אז הטבע האמיתי שלנו כאהבה נחשף, ואז החיים שלנו בעצם הופכים להיות ביטוי של בגבעת להשתמש במילה kindness, אדיבות, רצון טוב כלפי הזולת, חיבה, והוא אמר שזה בסופו של דבר גם טוב בשביל האגו, כי גם האגו נהיה מבסוט מזה שהוא בעצם נכנע, והדברים מתנהלים בצורה טובה. That's it, Shri Bagavath.
Okay. Any clarification necessary?
I need a clarification. So, as we discussed in the last problem, so you had mentioned in don't delay enlightenment, conscious mind, subconscious mind, unconscious mind, 3 layers. In don't delay enlightenment.
Unconscious, deeper conscious mind.
Yeah, deeper conscious. So here the deeper conscious mind is chitta, is the character. That's what you mean?
No. The subconscious mind is the character.
Okay, then deeper conscious mind is?
Deeper conscious mind is the hidden mind.
It's not classified here.
Now we are not dealing with anything. Yeah. It is deeper layer, but so it is just like a cosmic mind. Deeper conscious mind is just like a cosmic mind.
Okay, so subconscious mind is character, chitta.
That is our personal mind. But
the
deeper conscious mind is a universal mind.
Okay, so let us take subconscious mind. That's what we meant by unconscious, I think so. Now for example, I'll give an example now. Half an hour before I was speaking to Lanir, and I was very kind to him. After half an hour, I had some thoughts in me about my past, something that happened. And now I had a physical sensation that I got agitated. Now I'm speaking angrily towards Lanir. That has nothing to do with Lanir. So I feel a sensation in my body that I'm agitated, I'm feeling restlessness, all those stuff. So do you call this as sensation? Or sensory perception, sensory, what you are saying?
So it is everything is the expression. Everything is the expression, whether it is in the body or mind or whatever it be. So it is the expression of some emotion, some feeling. But we feel the feeling. So the feeling is the sensory part.
Okay.
So within the sensory part, there is no discrimination. This is good, this is bad. There is no discrimination of good and bad. So it is just feeling the happening of the emotion. It may be good or bad. But the good and bad is labeled by the ego part.
Okay. So what I understand is my subconscious mind produces some emotions, some unpleasant feeling. So once the unpleasant feeling is felt in my body, my ego and intellect comes and fights with this unpleasant feeling. So this is what you want to get submitted. So don't fight with your own sensations of the body, or you don't fight with the unpleasant emotions of the body. Just accept your defeat and go back and submit. That's what you mean?
But we should not take any responsibility to set right anything.
Okay.
So the ego is always taking responsibility to set right something. So it has, because of the ego alone, all problem comes. Because even before the arising of the problem, the ego may be the reason. The ego takes some responsibility. Only because of taking some responsibility alone, the unnecessary feeling comes. If it does not take any responsibility, the role of responsibility alone is the problem.
Okay. So as you said, the reason for unpleasant feelings may be ego, but we don't know, because only after unpleasant feelings comes to my body, I know. So after that, what ego thinks is I can control my unpleasant feeling. I can remove my unpleasant feeling. It takes that responsibility because of ignorance.
Yeah.
So
out of ignorance, it takes.
Ignorance. So now we are enlightening the intellect, that you don't have the power to enlighten the intellect, so it gets submitted. So can I understand in this way? Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Shri Bagavath?
Leonard, you can. Any clarification or you can?
Just one small thing. Maybe, many people are suggesting to many spiritual teachers are suggesting to be present in the now. So present in the now, it's a sort of being present in the sensory perception, giving more attention to what you hear, what you see, what you sense, what you feel. Is it related to what you're saying, or there is no relation?
So relationship is there, but here the main is the stress is given to the sensory aspect. But here the stress must be given to the submission. So there is it is one corner, the other one is the other corner. The one corner is the sensory aspect, the other corner is the submission. So the problem is in this taking some role. The failure of submission alone is the problem. Because of taking some responsibility alone creates problem. So the responsibility alone must be submitted. So here the problem is there. Where the problem we have to solve there. There is no problem in the sensory aspect. So there is no salvation. No salvation is necessary towards the sensory aspect. But everybody is aiming in the name of some attention and being in the present. Even J. Krishnamurti also choicelessly awareness. So we need not take it as a kind of practice. When we take it as a practice, the sensory part is not taking doing the practice. The ego is taking the practice. So the ego is again strengthened. So the problem is again strengthened.
I understand. So
so even many masters like Eckhart Tolle advise present moment. So what there is, once the problem is solved in the conscious mind, we automatically fall into the sensory perception mode. That's our default mode. So the problem is in the conscious mind. Once we solve this, the mind automatically falls into the sensory perception. So in that way, we are reaching the same point, not by practice, but by solving it.
Yeah, like when the ego is submitting, then naturally
we're left with the
conscious present moment, but working the other way around.
It's similar. For example, if I'm sitting in the home, now I am having a sensory perception of this fan, sound, everything. When a lion or tiger enters in my room, my conscious mind is taking responsibility of throwing that lion outside. So if that emergency situation is not there, then automatically my conscious mind falls into the sensory perception. So we need to solve how to throw the lion outside. Once that is solved, being in home is not a practice needed for that. So that's how I understand.
So when the emergency happens, the total mind takes the role. But
Okay.
here, when the normal situation alone, when the ego takes the role, the ego plans, ego prepares everything, but the sensory part does not prepare. So the total, within the conscious mind, the sensory part and the ego part is there. So within the conscious mind itself, some struggle. Because of the ego part alone, the struggle is going on within the conscious mind. Otherwise, the conscious mind, even though the conscious mind, the major portion of the conscious mind is the sensory part. The sensory part is within the conscious mind.
Yes, yeah. My question is, if we have labeled already our unpleasant emotion as a tiger, then we'll automatically take responsibility. So when it comes, we will see it as a tiger, an unpleasant emotion. So the intellect has to learn the tiger, that unpleasant emotion is not a tiger. So this updation has to happen. This is what you mean by submission.
So here, the ego is the problem. We need not worry about the emotion. The problem is the ego, not the emotion.
Yeah, but ego labels the emotion as tiger.
The ego labeling instead of labeling, we have to take the control. We have to take anything under the control of the ego. So that the taking responsibility is the ego. By labeling, it takes the responsibility.
Yeah. So when an unpleasant emotion comes, it labels as a dangerous one, and I can remove this dangerous object from my room, and it tries to remove it. That's what the fight is. So this game has to be stopped. That's what you mean by submission of ego.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Then you can continue. My part is over.
Okay, so I will just make a short summary in Hebrew.
Okay.
אז דיברנו כאן קצת על המשמעות של תפילה, הדרך שבגבת מצביעה עליה, לבין התרגול של להישאר ברגע הזה למשל, להיות נוכח כאן ועכשיו, להיות עם התפיסה החושית. אז שבגבת אמר שבעצם יש כאן מקל שיש לו שני קצוות, שהאחד מוביל אל השני. זאת אומרת שברגע שקורית כניעה, שהאגו באמת נכנע ומבין שהוא זה הבעיה, שהאחריות שהוא לוקח על פתרון הבעיות היא הבעיה בעצמה, והוא נכנע, אז באופן טבעי ישנה הישארות ברגע הזה, ישנה נוכחות כאן ועכשיו, וישנה אהבה שפותרת את כל הבעיות. אבל אם אנחנו ננסה להפוך את זה לתרגול, אז זה עוד פעם האגו נכנס בדלת האחורית, והוא עכשיו לוקח את התפקיד של לתרגל את להישאר כאן ועכשיו, או מה שזה לא יהיה. ואז למעשה בעצם הפתרון לא קרה, כי האגו ממשיך לקבל חשיבות. זה למעשה מה שדיברנו. אז עצם העניין, הדבר החשוב ביותר, הוא שאותה תחושת אגו, אותה תחושה של אני העושה, כלפי העולם הפנימי, ותבין שזה לא התפקיד שלה לנהל את העניינים בעולם הפנימי. בעצם.
אוקיי. And in the next week, if I am available, we can have our meeting. But what is your opinion about having our meeting on Mondays
It's possible. No problem.
Possible. So here in every Sundays we are trying to have some special program for young people. So in Tamil in the morning it is for some special program in each and every Sundays. So next Sundays or after Sundays, in every Sundays we are trying in the morning, in the evening regular meeting in Tamil. So
No.
we can have safely, we can have our meeting in the Monday morning.
No problem.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Leonard. Thank you, Asher.
Thanks very much. Thank